So my name is Jody Webb, and I'm the Executive Director here at Pathfinder Services of North Dakota. And I just wanted to welcome you to the listening session about the Parents Matter Initiative. Following the session and discussion, and kind of throughout too, there will be time for questions and answers after. And then if you wanted more details on this, we encourage you, we put it in the chat session, but you can join our information mailing list, and that's info@pathfinder-nd.org. One of the things that we've been looking at as an organization is family engagement. And we can all agree that it is an essential piece of bridging that gap between school and home. And here at Pathfinders, we are starting to build and expand our services in that area. So luckily, we're going in a partnership here with Miss Angela, and we're incredibly excited because she's chosen our state to be the very first participants in her new initiative. So we'll be piloting this initiative, which will then be used nationwide. So super exciting.
Yes, very excited.
Yes, a little bit about Angela. She is a world-renowned author, entrepreneur, and international keynote speaker and educator, whose transformative message of the importance of mattering has the power to unleash the genius in us all. So Angela is the founder of Choose to Matter, with additional initiatives of Genius Matters, Mattergrams, and now Parents Matter. So welcome, Angela, and the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And for those that are tuning in later, I'm really happy to be working with you all and sharing this message. Before it evolved into Parents Matter, I, like many teachers out there, are sort of told or given the charge, because no one disagrees that parent involvement is not a good thing. Like, it just is like one of those common sense no-brainers. Like, of course we want parents involved. And so the question is really defining what that looks like. So for our rewind 32 years of first-year teacher in an inner-city school, and we had just hired a parent coordinator. I thought every school had one, but apparently we were really lucky because we had 2 people specifically hired for parent involvement and parent engagement. And so we were given the charge, like every teacher at that time, I was a kindergarten teacher, so every teacher had to do a parent event. I think it was once a month. It was part of our grant. And so, you know, we just did what we thought, you know, we wanted to share with parents what school was about. And like many teachers face, they put all this time and energy and really goodwill into involving parents. And what it turns out to be is really how teachers want parents to be involved. And so it was like, well, this is what we want good parents to do, and parents that didn't do it, then you were frustrated with them. And I think one of the bigger frustrations, even if they didn't implement what you might be sharing with them on literacy night or math night or whatever night conferences, was attendance. And you think, like, that was a really frustrating thing. At our school, attendance was in the bottom 5%. Like, if we got 5% of the parents, it was great. So I stayed in that cycle of doing those monthly workshops and trying to get parents to understand how I wanted them to help with math or help with literacy or help with whatever I deemed or school deemed was important, and them not responding, and then them not showing up, and figuring out how to do more like incentives to get them there. And finally, I just went into the community. I stopped trying to do things at school. I went into the community and just started listening to parents and understanding that they're not coming to school or not coming to that or to the events that we plan for a number of reasons. And first and foremost is school's not always a warm, welcoming place for all parents. And so even though we try to be, school has a lot of negative memories for many, many families. And so as you started listening deeper to parents and understanding that, you know what, I feel a lot more comfortable in my home or in my community, started doing things at community centers and going to their house. And what sort of flipped things on its lid for me is I started changing my mindset, thinking that these families, which were at that time 100% free and reduced lunch, we had 130% mobility, 99% of our families were in poverty or some kind of crisis, that just trying to stay afloat, trying to be the best parent that they know how with the tools they have, was consuming the majority of their existence. Parents were riding buses to get to work, working 3 jobs, 4 jobs, trying to figure out childcare. It just was all of these issues. And then on top of it, I'm saying, well, you need to read to your child 20 minutes a night, and you need to do this. And so I could check off my boxes. And I started thinking, we need to really redefine what this box is and get to the core of what are the barriers that allow parents not to be a part of school. And so it started this whole sort of mindset shift for me that I didn't realize it, but unintentionally, I thought that I was there to save them, to make them better, meaning parents and families, from the misnomer that what they were doing was not okay and not good. And so when I stopped trying to see them as needy, and I switched the narrative and switched the story, that my mission is to show you how needed you are in the work that I want to do with your child, how needed you are with your children, how needed you are in the community and the world, and in essence, try to convince them or showcase for them how much they mattered. And even though I didn't have the words or the foundation, I got a completely different response and reaction from parents when I started asking them to contribute and asking them to be a part of the planning. And we started moving into not only stronger indicators of involvement, from participation to communication, but deeper levels of engagement, really, truly powerful conversations, and ultimately led to a pathway of beautiful partnership. But it required this mindset shift. And all the time this was happening, all the while this was happening, we had adopted as a district, as a state, traditional, what I would call parent involvement programs that laid out what we were supposed to do as teachers. You need to do this, and you need to say this, and you need to share this. And none of those really got to the core that it's not a program isn't going to change perception, that you've got to have something that changes the mindset and ultimately changes the conversation about how we see each other, not just how we as teachers and schools see parents, but equally important, how parents see us. And right now, I would say, even 32 years later, I wouldn't, if you surveyed 1,000 parents, I wouldn't say that their perception is they're in a deep partnership with schools. So what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree? Would you disagree? Jake, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So are we off mute then?
Yeah.
Well, it's a really interesting description. I'm a grandparent now, and
Yeah.
I look back at the work that we did with our kids. We had one of our children that had some real challenge with reading, and we were always frustrated with the hours of homework that we were required to invest. I had a great job, and my wife was finished working by 6 o'clock, so we had time, but it was exhausting.
Yes.
And so the way to describe, trying to find a new mindset to connect families, I think, is a really terrific approach. I see the department as we move forward with the array of services, to really help support those families in those, whether it's an economic issue or substance use issue or a mental health issue, or, maybe the child is also coping with some intellectual or developmental disabilities. All of those sorts of in-home supports and or school supports that we can bring would help enhance the parents' capability of and capacity, mostly because they're usually so exhausted they don't know what to do next. And so, yeah, I think there's real opportunity. And I love the way you described the mind trip.
I think thank you for sharing that, Jake. I think there are incredible support systems there. But what I've learned with working with parents for 30 years is that you can't help somebody unless you've heard them. And that's the core of mattering. The core of this, I hate calling it a program. It's an invitation and an expectation that each of us will contribute our full, authentic selves to the partnership. That not only do we value what you bring to the table, we need what you bring to the table. And that was the key, the key differentiator, the key factor that changed the relationship between the families that I worked with and myself in my classroom and in my school, is they didn't feel needed for anything that they brought to the table. That I heard over and over and over, that you don't understand, that you're not listening, that you're not walking this walk or our shoes. And so when you started, so in business we call it taking the customer journey. When you take the parent's journey from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, and you default with compassion, and you default with openness and open-mindedness and empathy and not judgment. And it's hard to admit that you as a caring, loving individual can be judgmental. But when we're working with families that come from different cultures, different family structures, different ways of disciplining, different experiences than you were raised or grew up, it's really easy to be judgmental. And so it's a really hard look at ourselves, and also parents a really hard look at their selves. So I always told my families, we don't need to see eye to eye if we see heart to heart. And if we are in a constant state of knowing that we are headed toward something bigger than any of our individual agendas or goals. And if we know that we can't get there without each other, without contributing fully on both sides, then there's a whole different level of conversation happening. And so I think parents feel like in a partnership there's a little unbalance, like the school is the authority and that we must adhere to that authority. And to some respects that's true, but that's, if we say parents are children's first teacher, and understanding what lessons are taught in the home and how do we build on those strengths versus see deficit. Say, well, you're not coming and you're not reading 20 minutes a day. If I looked at the standards that I held up to my parents when I first started this work, it was, you will read 20 minutes a night with your child, you will have a proper bedtime, you will have, I mean, my parents were living in cars, or they were in and out of shelters, or they were dealing with having to move from apartment to apartment because the water main broke in their apartment and there's sewage coming in. These were not things that I was dealing with growing up. And when you're an overwhelmed human being, just to get your basic needs met, it's not that they're against reading to their kids 20 minutes a night, but that seemed to be the only standard. Like, you come to conferences twice a year, you come to one family night, you read to your kid 20 minutes a night, and now you get to be in the good parent group. And I learned what it felt like as a working mom, not meeting those standards of my own kid's school, and the judgment that I got for not being present when I was fully present, but in a different way than it was calibrated by school. So there's a lot of breakdown of misconceptions and reframing expectations. And the deepest expectation of any relationship is that you will get my full self. I'm imperfect. I don't know how to do this all by myself. We are smarter together. We are better together, and we'll figure it out together. I'll be honest with you. I'll be authentic with you. I'll tell you where I'm struggling. I'll ask for your advice. So in the same way we approach any partnership, we have to really look at, Is it truly a partnership we're seeking, or are we just seeking cooperation from parents? And a lot of times the programs that have been adopted or the standards that have been sort of laid out for us are really just seeking cooperation. They're not seeking partnership. And that's not, it's not a condemnation of schools or parents. It's just how we've always done things. Jim Collins calls this autopsy without blame. So we have to autopsy the relationship right now without blame on either part and say, are our expectations clear? Are the values we're putting forth aligned? Are we creating conditions for both sides of the partnership to succeed? Do parents really know what we can do? But I think the first step in that is parents need to understand that they matter not because they do X, Y, and Z, or not if they come to school or when they complete 3 parent workshops. It's unequivocal. It is a straightforward truth. You matter, period. Even if you didn't read to your kid 20 minutes a week, even if you fed them sugar on the weekend and you might not have been the best idea, or even if there were imperfect moments and you yelled at your child and you didn't mean to. I think society in general is incredibly, incredibly judgmental and hard on families. And there is this sense that no matter what I do, I'm a failure. No matter what I do, I'm not enough. And until we cross what I call the worthiness barrier, we're not going to get any bridge to any level of truly deep engagement, let alone partnership. So the core of the work in Parents Matter is on that subject, is on the agenda of mattering. And until we make parents operate, parent, lead, model from a place of worthiness, we're not going to get the kind of partnership that our kids deserve, that the kids deserve. And so I look at, there's not a single parent, it doesn't matter if they're living in poverty or they're living on Wall Street, there's not a single parent that doesn't face the struggle with insignificance, the struggle with, am I doing enough? Is this right? I'm too embarrassed to tell somebody that I did X, Y, and Z because I don't want them to like judge me or charge me with something, for God's sakes, at that level. But we lose our temper with kids, and kids are trying on both sides. And I think we, at first glance, before we dig into any content or any school-related, causes, that we have to understand that we're there for each other, that this is hard work, that kids today and all that they face, not kids today from a negative thing, but kids today in this context have much more challenge and much greater uncertainty, and that there's very few support systems that are absolutely stable, that are unfeathering. They don't judge, they just accept whatever is. And I think that we should be that for parents, or we should create an environment where parents are that for each other. And right now, there's so much isolation in teaching and so much isolation in parenting that we have to dig through those issues before we start looking at how you can help math and how you can help science and how you can help literacy. And I know that seems counterproductive, that, this is an agenda that isn't really addressed head on. It's not addressed explicitly with teachers, with kids, with families, and with community. And I'm saying we have to reboot that mindset. This is the only agenda if we wish all other agendas to be met. So what are your thoughts?
Wow. Wow.
Is that a good wow, Jake?
That's an incredible wow. It's, you've described, relating to families in a way that will, just change their world, their parent or their child's education, their willingness to interact with the teacher and the school in general. you know, wow. So do we have a bunch of schools on?
Well, so this is hard. So the hardest part for me is to create, I guess, sustainment of this message, this agenda. And so I've worked really hard to put concrete practices. So I always say that whether I'm talking about teachers feeling like they matter, or school leaders feeling like they matter, or parents feeling like they matter, every principle I'm speaking out about is common sense. But it's not commonplace and it's not common practice. Right. So we have to adopt these disciplines and protocols and rituals, and we have to retrain our own souls, our own spirits, to build these practices into our lives and not see self-care and not see that the sustainment of this agenda as a nicety, that it is an absolute necessity. I was sharing with the group when I was there a few weeks ago. I just left working with the FBI, the Center for Disease Control, all the area hospitals, first responders, and I was called to Middle America, in any city America, and like not inner city or anything, and they had there was 16 suicides in 4 months, and the earliest age was 5 years old. And so in the data of trying to figure out, they classified it as a contagious disease, and the FBI said this is imminent danger for every community, even though this was an advanced case, that the spread of insignificance and the struggle with understanding your worthiness and enoughness is so pandemic. It's an invisible pandemic that every industry and every organization and every stakeholder has to be a part of making mattering the agenda. And so I think the other unique value of this invitation for parents to have the expectation that they will practice the discipline of worthiness for their mission as parents for their children, and teachers will do this, and kids will do this, and community members, is that 80% of what I say with teachers, what I say with school leaders, what I say with kids, is the exact same language and structure and procedures and practices as what I'm saying to parents. So mattering is the agenda, period, no matter who you are, because this is something every human being, whether they live on the street or work on Wall Street, is in a constant state of having to figure out. So that is the other thing that happened at my school. We were a school that, because of our population, parent involvement was one of our top priorities, but at other schools it wasn't. So it was pretty random. Like, we were doing this parent involvement program, but the school down the road wasn't. But we were doing something different as teachers, and different as school leaders, and different as a community. And so it always seems like an add-on afterthought. Mattering is not an add-on afterthought for any community or human that we work with. So teachers matter, students matter, parents matter, schools matter. 80% of the conversation, the curriculum, and the practices are the same no matter what group you're working with. And that's a really important differentiator, because it's not the same for any other program.
So how are the folks that our education
Say that one more time, Jake.
How are our folks in the schools responding? Jody?
So what's interesting, and what makes me so proud to work with North Dakota, it usually, because it's like such a, what do I want to say, interconnected, interrelated thing. So one day I'll be working with school leaders, one day I'll be working with teachers, one day I'll be working with businesses that support the school, and all of them are calling me to address mattering, all of them. But no one has really adopted the system-wide practices. They'll do the keynote, they'll take a little class here, they'll do it because they know that it's an issue, but I don't want to wait till we get to we get to an urgency state, like in Ohio, in the city that I'm working with. We can't wait till it gets to be Parkland, or we can't wait till it gets to be Sandy Hook before we start taking this agenda seriously. So you are literally the first state, not only that is addressing this message and mission with parents, but that is seeking to do it in a systemic way statewide. And so you really are a model, setting a precedent for what I wish and believe and will fight for, an agenda for every school when they think of parent involvement. It doesn't mean the other things are not effective, but I think until you get to the core, they're all just Band-Aids. I mean, I've seen everything from bribing parents to offering everything from childcare to busing and everything, just to get numbers to say we got this much attendance, and nothing changes. So I think that everything that we do is going to be a surface level Band-Aid until we get to the core of why people aren't engaging with the world, not only with each other, but with the world at full force.
So as we start, I guess, messaging and putting that message out to North Dakota, we have invited Title I administrators, superintendents, the state DPI. So it's just it's starting to trickle. So, yeah. Slowly but surely. But we did record this session today, and we are going to send this session out to everybody.
Yeah.
So if the pretty picture and link didn't entice them, maybe this video will.
Yeah.
And so then we'll have more people kind of asking what it's all about and how can I become more involved in the initiative.
And if we could, I think the hardest part with education is we've always done it that way. And the concept of best practice, and I'm not anti-best practice, so I want to make that clear. But what we're dealing with right now is something, so I'm not saying necessarily new, but so contextually relevant. So this year, the World Economic Forum every year brings world leaders from all over, and they tackle one global issue that affects the world's economy, that affects every aspect of how we live in the world. And it's been everything from global warming to animal rights to, whatever it is. And this year, for the first year, it was insignificance. So at the World Economic Forum in Davos, they picked mattering, basically, however you wanted to say it, but they picked mattering as the world's greatest global pandemic. So that wasn't the case 30 years ago. And I can tell you just in my own experience that I have 9 books and I have content on all kinds of subjects coming out my ears that I've been researching and writing about for over 2 decades. And when I first started speaking and working with schools, I would be all about my content. Angela, can you come talk to us about XYZ? Angela, will you come talk to us about 21st century skills or whatever it is? The number one request, probably 98% of my work from every industry. It can be bankers one week, NASA astronauts another week, kindergarten teachers another week, school board members another week, but universally, every organization says, can you please help my employees, my students, my teachers, whoever the human is, feel like they matter. So something is so different that isn't accounted for in best practices, because we've never had to have a practice that addresses this so aggressively and so intently, because lives are at stake. Literally, lives are at stake. So the data that exists, but we're not necessarily looking at in terms of parent involvement, is there's data on morale. Teacher morale is lower than it's ever been in the history of education. That absolutely affects any partnership that teachers are going to be a part of. the superintendent, I just was doing this state superintendent conference, and the number one factor affecting superintendents is lack of hope. So when I started teaching 31 years ago, hope and stress, I just did new teachers, 6,000 new teachers, and the burnout rate and the stress rate for new teachers is 3 years. It used to be 30 years, and then you started feeling burnt out. My point is, there is a new world dynamic right now. And whether it existed always and it's just come to a head because we're in a time in our history that we've never experienced, that we can't explain, that is dense with uncertainty and riddled with fear, and fear being realistic and fear being propagated by every media outlet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The levels of stress and uncertainty affect every single human being touching kids, whether it's their employer, whether it is their other classmates, whether it's families next door, whether it's their own family, whether it's their school. And we have got to handle this. And we don't have time to study it for 20 years and decide that this was best practice. This is now practice, and this is next practice. And lives depend on us taking this data of human life seriously. Thoughts? And the positive note is, like I shared in just a few of the exercises in this invitation, we were together as a team, and it doesn't take a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of money to make people feel like they matter. It just takes leadership, and it takes really dedicated intention. But there is massive hope. There's massive hope, because when people feel like they matter, they feel absolutely invincible in the world. They are better parents, they're better teachers, they're better leaders, and they're better human beings that enter the world. And our kids need models of that.
I remember the great teachers that I had growing up, and they were the teachers that made you feel great about yourself.
Yes.
And encouraged you, and
yes,
and didn't let the small mistake keep you from trying again.
That's right.
And so you felt that, like you mattered to the teacher, and that you were a valuable person. And so the more that we can do to help each person, family, superintendent,
yep,
whatever, whoever we're talking to feel valued and cared about, they can be the best that they can be.
Absolutely.
We used to just take this for granted that we treat each other well.
Yes.
And we didn't always do that, but we assumed that we did. And now, I guess it does speak to where we're at as a society, and that, we've gotten to the point where we're kind of anonymous and it doesn't matter. And,
yes.
And so now paying attention to it, I think, is a crucial issue. And, I applaud what you guys are doing, and whatever we can do to help, we'll want to do.
Thank you so much. I would say that the two other component parts that make this invitation unique is that technology is seen as, in many cases, blamed as the culprit for our feeling isolated and our feeling like we don't matter, but used in the right way could do the opposite, could amplify the agenda. And if we use it correctly. So embedded in the work are 2 or 3 different kinds of technology platforms, community-driven, that enhance what we're doing with the community cafes, that integrate video, which is a huge component of helping people. That's why I asked you, Jake, to put your video on, because it's a lot less likely that you will judge somebody, that you will make a harsh assumption if you're looking in their eyes. And even if it's through video, the level in which it enhances and increases trust is profound. And yet the default for many, many of our parents will be to not use the video. And so being able to integrate in the home powerful technology tools that help accelerate our agenda of feeling more connected, feeling more valued, feeling heard by each other on and within our community and within these two communities is really, really important. And the second agenda that goes with that, the consequence, is we're modeling powerful use of technology. Technology should be used when it does something that would otherwise be impossible. And that's the kind of technology we want to model. We don't just want to put parents on a platform to do what they could do any other time, to just do one-sided things like get information or get their kids' grades or access that transactional thing that school and parents have always played and danced around. We want technology to be an amplifier of the mattering agenda. And so we have strategic partners that are potential in testing out with schools, are working with, and that's with every stakeholder, so that there is a culture of mattering. So this is something teachers are talking to their kids about, kids are talking to each other about, the school is adopting as a culture, leaders are talking to each other, and also, this is the core of our conversation with parents. And there's nothing else out there that exists like this, because everything else is about a different agenda. Not a bad agenda, just a different agenda.
So at this time, if there's any more questions, now's the time to ask them, but I think we'll be kind of tying it up for today.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything else? Okay, well, thanks, Angela, for joining us, and everybody who joined the call.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, and you'll hear more. So remember, if you go to info@pathfinder-nd.org, join the mailing list, and we'll keep sending out that information.
Thank you.